Zohran Mamdani and 9/11. What did those things have to do with each other? The EBT food scam is apparently exposed in the government shutdown, and JD Vance debates college students at the university in honor of Charlie Kirk. All that and more coming up today on the Ocean Rosso Show. Let's begin with something that's a bit of a hot topic in current America. EBT, food stamps, SNAP benefits. During the current government shutdown, this has effectively stopped these benefits from going to American citizens and non-American citizens, as we will see in just a moment. But before I begin talking about this, I want to make my position clear. I very much sympathize with certain people who are using EBT and SNAP benefits. I believe that the American government should take care of citizens who are unable to work, who are unable to afford groceries at this current economic market. And so, yes, I do think that part of the government's job in protecting our life, our liberty, and our property should be to help its citizens. But I think that we can make the system better. And if there's anything that this government shutdown is showing us, it's that we can do that. And it's not just with EBT and SNAP benefits. No, I think this government shutdown will show many areas in our federal government where we can scale back spending and costs. And we can, as a country, unite behind certain principles. Principles like the government protecting our life, liberty, and property and not going into $38 trillion of debt. So, our current fiscal position is getting worse by the day. We are spending extreme amounts on unnecessary items and expenditures in the government. And I think part of that is the EBT and food stamp benefits. So let's just take a look at this. Is a chart that we have that shows food stamp spending, or just spending in general, food expenditures compared between SNAP households and non-SNAP households. And I want to take a look specifically at sweetened beverages. We see that in SNAP households, 9.2% of food expenditures go to sweetened beverages. That's almost 10% of expenditures on food. Whereas in non-SNAP households, only 7% of expenditures are going to sweetened beverages. We can take a look at prepared desserts. Almost 7% of expenditures in SNAP households are going toward prepared desserts, whereas only 6.4% in non-SNAP households is going toward desserts. If we flip this idea around, we can look at vegetables. 9% of the food expenditures in non-SNAP households are going to vegetables, compared to 7% in SNAP households. The story is same with fruits. 7% of expenditure going toward fruits in non-SNAP households, whereas only 4% going toward fruit in SNAP households. As you can see, I do not think these SNAP benefits are going towards necessary items. In fact, this is a list of some of the items that food stamps can be used to purchase. Little Debbie's oatmeal cream pies, M&Ms, Snickers, double stuffed Oreos. These are not food staples, things that you need to live. No, these are indulgent items. I think we need to scale back our spending because our spending is getting out of control. In fact, this is a chart from the US Department of Agriculture showing our expenditures, our spending when it comes to food stamps. And this ends in December of 2022. I would like to take a guess at how much we are spending today in October of 2025 on food stamps. Let's see, in December 2019, we were spending $4.5 billion on food stamps. That almost doubles by December of 2020, 7.8 billion. By December of 2021, 9.9 billion. And by December of 2022, we are at $11 billion going toward food stamp benefits. Now, this isn't even the part that really makes me angry at this system. The portion of this system that I'm upset with, more than all of this, is the fact that we are spending money to feed illegal immigrants. Yes, a citizen's job, or a government's job, is to take care of its citizens, rather, not its non-citizens. Yet, so we have statistics showing that 1 in every 8 Americans, so that's 45 million Americans, are on some form of SNAP benefits. But 59% of illegal immigrants are benefiting from SNAP benefits. 1.4 million non-citizens and 2.2 million children living with non-citizens are benefiting from SNAP benefits. In fact, let's take a look at a video. This is in my home state of Arizona, of an Iraqi immigrant complaining about the fact that SNAP benefits have stopped flowing to him and his family. Let's take a look.
Without the government support, I cannot stay maybe a month or 2 months.
Pima County Chairman Rex Scott told News for Tucson he's deeply concerned about the impact on local refugees.
So I think I have a right to be angry, because the government should be spending money where it needs to. We should not be going into more and more debt every day so that we can feed people who are not even American citizens. Yes, we should go out across the world and help other people, but should the taxpayers foot the bill? No, I do not believe so. Let's shift from this idea to another radical idea. Someone who is actually extremely radical, who I believe is about to become the next mayor of New York City. Zohran Mamdani. So we all know Zohran Mamdani as the socialist Democratic candidate for New York City mayor. But Zohran seems to have made a quite bizarre comment just a few days ago about 9/11 and how Muslims are the real, they're the ones who have been greatly harmed by 9/11. Let's take a look at that clip.
I want to use this moment to speak to the Muslims of New York City. I want to speak to the memory of my aunt. Who stopped taking the subway after September 11th because she did not feel safe in her hijab.
So it appears as though Zohran Mamdani is making it out to be that the Muslims are the victims of 9/11. But you know something that I find bizarre? That's not the case. Americans embrace other cultures. You know, I think that this is what makes America so amazing, is that we choose to embrace other people. It really is incredible. You know, you don't see this in any other country throughout all of history that will freely open its doors to other people who have different beliefs. No, America is the only place where you can go from nothing, an immigrant coming to a foreign nation and building up an empire, building up a business, innovation, wealth. And the fact that Zohran wants to focus on his aunt is quite interesting. And actually, this is where the story gets a little interesting, in my opinion, because his aunt, his Zafui, he says she was afraid to ride in the subways of New York City because she was wearing her hijab. But we had some fact checkers on the internet actually take a deep dive into this claim, and it turns out that his Zafui neither wears a hijab nor rides in the subways of New York City anytime around 9/11. Take a look. Yeah, so as we can see, Zohran Mamdani is clearly fabricating this part of the story. And now he has to walk back his claims and say, well, actually, my Zafui, my aunt, is my father's cousin. My father's cousin. For someone who doesn't understand basic economic principles, believing that he can open a network of city-owned grocery stores and give out free bus rides, I wonder if Zohran Mamdani understands basic English. No, an aunt is not your father's cousin. I don't even know any of my father's cousins, to be honest. This just goes to show if Zohran Mamdani is going to lie about something this small, what else is he fabricating? What else is he fabricating? I do think that in all of this turmoil that's taken over New York City, with Zohran Mamdani appearing to be the front runner, the person most likely to be the next mayor of New York City, according to all betting markets, according to the polls, we have to take a look at how he's gotten there. Because and I think my generation has a part to play in all this. Gen Z. For all the talk that we hear that Gen Z is the most conservative generation and that they'll be bringing us back to our traditional roots. Yes, I see that trend in young men in Gen Z. But for the most part, that's not happening. My generation is the most radical generation. We reject any ideas of capitalism in favor of democratic socialism, in favor of an idea that has failed and failed over and over. Can you name one country, one single nation that has benefited from socialism? You probably can't. Not a single nation comes to mind. Not a single one. And even those countries that claim to be semi-socialist, the Nordic countries, China, but if you take a look at their economic policy, they are capitalists at heart. I find it quite interesting that we have the idea that Marx created, that it's all the poor workers who will start a revolution and overthrow the bourgeois class. But it's actually that class of wealthy millionaires and billionaires who are leading the charge for democratic socialism. And we need to reform our ideology in America. Because if we don't start now, our nation, which is already on the precipice of a dangerously radical ideology, will only continue to fall until we lose the very ideals we were originally founded to preserve. One gentleman who is working toward the preservation of America and of these precious principles is our Vice President, JD Vance. I was amazed at the fact that, and I think this is the first time, correct me if I'm wrong, the first time that we have had a sitting vice president go to a college campus and openly debate and tackle the hard questions thrown at him by college students without these students having been vetted. It is incredible that we have a vice president who is willing to be on the firing line and accept these hard questions. Questions that have to do with the Trump administration, that have to do with the current economic state of America. But one question that I enjoyed more than any other, and I enjoyed JD's response to this question, was on the freedom of religion in America and its relationship with the First Amendment. Take a look.
I want to just make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page here. So if you go back to the First Amendment, it doesn't say separation of church and state. It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. But if you go back to the founding time, there were actually a number of states that had formally recognized churches. So there was the Anglican Church of Virginia. That was the official state church of Virginia. Maryland at the time was the only majority Catholic colony, or at least had a significant Catholic representation of the original 13 colonies. There's a lot there. And yes, I do think that what happened is the Supreme Court interpreted Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion to effectively throw the church out of every public space at the federal, state, and local level. I think it was a terrible mistake, and we're still paying for the consequences of it today. But if, and I think this is your point, if you were to undo that, if you were to get back to a system actually meant by the founders where Congress is not setting up an established religion, but people in their local communities can kind of do whatever it is that they want to do, I think that would be a better system than what we have today. But I think the most important principle that we have got to remember is you do not have to completely kick God out of the public square, which is what we've done in modern America. It's not what the founders wanted. It's not good for the United States of America. And anybody who tells you it's required by the Constitution is lying to you. Thank you.
So JD Vance is explaining a very basic principle that I think that a lot of Americans seem to have forgotten. The fact that the First Amendment doesn't guarantee a separation of church and state. You know, this is something that fascinates me, where we have people going around saying, oh, the government can't get involved. How dare the government post a tweet with the Bible verse? That's anti the First Amendment. No, the First Amendment doesn't say a separation of church and state is guaranteed. That phrase comes from a letter penned by Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptists, guaranteeing them the right to practice, the freedom to practice, the ability to practice their form of Christianity. All of our founders who signed the Declaration of Independence, all 56 of them, believed in a God. Our nation was founded on the basic principles of freedom and Christianity. Because liberty and freedom come from Christianity. I think that this is a principle that we have strayed from in recent years. We reject the idea of our nation being Christian. We believe that we have to bend the knee toward other religions and cultures. That we have to reform our ways in America to better fit the Islamic culture, or the Hindu culture, or the pagan culture. We reject the basic moral premises that our nation was founded on. The fact that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among these life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You know, John Adams said that our Constitution was created only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for any other. I think it's time that we revert back to these basic core principles that America was founded on. And one of those principles is certainly not violence, which has been an idea perpetuated by the radical left. And actually, we had Michael Knowles, the great conservative commentator, testify before the Senate on this idea. And I actually want to play a clip. This is of Senator Cory Booker, what he had to say about the radicals on both sides. Take a look.
Extremists who have left-wing ideologies and right-wing ideologies. To say it's just one and not the other is to deepen the problem. But we have an administration right now who is eviscerating the people that should be keeping us safe, and who is pulling down from the website, as they did earlier this year when the Department of Justice removed from its website a government-funded report published last year that found that the number of far-right attacks continues to outpace all other types of terrorism and domestic violence extremism. If we can't accurately describe a problem and do it without partisan rhetoric or seeking to score partisan points, we will not solve this problem.
Yes, so according to most Democrats, the radicals are on both sides. And I can agree to that in some part. Yes, there are radicals in every group. You will always have a radicalized form of a group. But the majority, most of the violence that we see today is coming from the radical left. You know, we've had, since ICE has gone out and started doing its job, we have had people blocking their cars. We had that man in Texas shoot up an ICE facility. We've had violence against the very people who are trying to protect us, and it has to stop. More than that, we have officials like Jay Jones in Virginia running for Virginia Attorney General. That's the highest attorney in Virginia. In fact, they are allowed to sue the governor. They are pretty much the highest elected official. We have people like Jay Jones going around wishing death upon his Republican opponents. He said in a text message that he hopes that his Republican opponents' children die in their mother's arms just to be able to shift his opponent's viewpoint on legislation. And when my hero Charlie Kirk was assassinated on September 10th, what did we see a few weeks later? At all the No Kings protests, people mocking his death. This is actually a clip that really upsets me. This is a teacher, a school teacher from Illinois. Let's take a look at what she had to say. Not even say, what she wanted to present and show at a No Kings protest.
Hey! You ever heard of Ozempic, you fat ass?
So as you can see, she's making the sign of being shot in the neck. Absolutely disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. We are allowing people like this to influence our children, the next generation, my generation. And we wonder why my generation's so radical, why we believe that democratic socialism, why we believe that communism is the answer, why we reject basic moral and civic virtues. It's because of people like this who have been influencing the next generation of Americans. You know, there's a strange obsession by the left, more than this, to call their enemies Hitler.
I haven't suggested that Donald Trump is Hitler. I wouldn't say
I don't
that.
think any Democrat has. I actually...
It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler, the man who is responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews.
How can you possibly compare what happened in Germany in World War II to what's going on here in the United States?
Well, we're talking about the death of a constitutional republic. That's what happened in Germany in 1933, 1934. And we're seeing today that you've got an administration in Washington that's ignoring court orders.
And this rogue Department of Justice going out to do the bidding of this Timu Hitler. I don't even know what to call him. I've called him so many things, but this wannabe Hitler for sure.
Trump actually reenacting the Madison Square Garden rally in 1939 that neo-Nazis, fascists in America.
Donald Trump's got this big rally going at Madison Square Garden. There's a direct parallel to a big rally that happened in the mid-1930s at Madison Square Garden. And don't think that he doesn't know for 1 second exactly what they're doing there.
You stand by the comparison, though, to a Nazi rally?
Look, the rally, you saw it for yourself. I'll let the American public make the decision of what they saw.
What about you, though?
So I know what I saw, and I'll just leave it at that.
I compared the rhetoric that the president has employed to rhetoric that you might have heard during the Third Reich. Calling human beings an infestation is something that we might have expected to hear in Nazi Germany.
Is that not going too far to make a comparison between the President of the United States and the Nazis?
Find me a better analogy.
He talks about the blood of America as being poisoned, echoing the same exact language used in Nazi Germany.
He is paving the way to become a Vladimir Putin or to become an Adolf Hitler or a Kim Jong-un. That's what he wants to be.
Donald Trump is also very old and a racist and a neo-Nazi.
Comparing the tactics of Donald Trump to Mussolini and Hitler is a very legitimate thing.
And, we've gotten used to it on the right. We really have. I get called Hitler all the time. A lot of my friends get called Hitler. Immediately, if you don't like your opponent, oh, they must be Hitler. And what did Hitler do? Well, he rounded up Jews and committed heinous atrocities in the Holocaust. So every person you don't like must be ready to commit a Holocaust, a genocide. In our morally destabilized culture, where we do not believe in Christian principles anymore as much as we did during the founding of America, we seem to have substituted the devil with Hitler. For an atheist, the pinnacle of evil is Adolf Hitler. So why are we so obsessed with calling our opponents Hitler? Because it provides a moral justification to stop them and their movement. I think that's what we saw with the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. With the assassination of a great American patriot and hero, Charlie Kirk. And we need to stop. We really do. We need to stop attacking each other so viciously. There used to be a time in American history where we used to have front porches at that time where you'd be able to debate with your neighbor, bring up these ideas of politics, religion, economics, philosophy. Yet today we are told these are the things that you cannot discuss. You absolutely cannot break up ties with family and friends over something so trivial as religion or philosophy or politics. What happened to the time in American history where I'd be able to go out and debate my neighbor or speak to my classmates about the principles of freedom and of faith and of family? We seem to have lost that in our culture. We really have. And so I believe that it's up to you, as much as it is up to me, to save this nation. Because if we take a look around at what's going on, we can agree that we are headed down the wrong track. I am grateful for President Trump, the greatest president of my lifetime, who is working tirelessly to save this nation, but he can't do it alone. He can't do it alone. Gen Z needs help. Gen A will certainly need help. And we need to be able to educate the next generation on these core ideas before we get another Zohran Mamdani, before we keep throwing away money at failed systems that are only buying junk food, before we silence our opponents and call them Hitler and end the debate. Because when we stop debating, we get violence. It's up to you to save America. The fate of our nation is in your hands. The question is, what will you do? Thank you very much for watching the first episode of The Ocean Rosso Show. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment down below any ideas or facts that you would like to share. God bless you all, and may God bless America.